Were there any specific mindset shifts that led you to become, a leader in AI from just a developer?
I think the big one is understanding that I have to.
Jason is one of the top AI consultants in the world. He worked with major companies like Zapier and HubSpot on their AI strategies, and his library instructor is now used by some of the largest organizations in the world. It's downloaded over 2.6 million times per month, and it completely changed how we think about AI agents today. I personally use it to build my own framework, and I'm sure many people did as well. So first, Jason, what are we hoping someone will get out of this episode if they watch until the end?
Yeah, generally it's the case that these AI agents that we think about, we should think about them in terms of a portfolio of tools. And all the work that we need to do and all the kinds of investments we need is about building out this portfolio. Can I do data analysis to add new tools? How do I verify the tools are doing what they can and cannot do? And if we combine them together, then we can get very valuable and economically viable AI agents.
How do you define AI agents and what makes them different from traditional LLM-based applications?
Yeah, I think now for the most part, I just see AI agents as an LLM with a portfolio of tools. And not only is that going to be the case, but you can oftentimes add or remove tools or add different context to make the AI sort of behave the right way. But I mostly think of it as just a tool calling in a for loop.
I think, honestly, the for loop might not be necessary in the future. Right now, the for loop does make sense because the agents just can't execute extended tasks. But as we can see on this research, we'll probably show it on the screen, the length of tasks that the AI can execute autonomously is growing exponentially. So now, like O3 is already at like 1.7 hours of autonomous just task execution, which means that we might not actually need the for loop when, using O3 for AI agents. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess in my mind, like just the calling a tool, getting the results, like that is the for loop. So I think we're actually totally in agreement in terms of like what this looks like.
So can you share any specific practices that you've discovered for making agents reliable in production?
Yeah, I think it would go back down to this like topic analysis, right? This clustering technique. Because really what's going to happen is two things. One, you're going to come up with some kinds of evals, some kind of LLM as a judge, and it's going to give you a number. And then you sort of look at this number and you go like, maybe this is good, maybe this is bad. I don't really know what 67 means. But if you can cut up your conversations or cut up your agents in these different clusters, like questions about finances or questions about scheduling or answers that require a lot of tables, now you have all these little different groups and you can compute the same score for each group. And now you'll see, oh, this one is really, really low. This one is really, really high. Clearly, I should look at whatever is low and fix that problem. And let me look at the conversations. Let's look at, the tools it uses and ask myself, is this eval low because it's really impossible? Or is it just because I'm missing some piece of the context or some tool that I know how to build? And you just plop it back in, you see those numbers go up, and then you just sort of do that forever.
So basically just setting up the evals from the start and just checking every metric that you can track.
Yeah, but most importantly, grouping things together so you actually know how to cut them up, right? If someone just tells you your marketing is bad, it's really hard to figure out what to do. But if someone said, hey, your marketing does really well for people under 25 and really bad for people over 25, now you can make a decision. Do I want to double down on my younger audience or do I need to change my content for an older audience? Right? Now it leads to an action.
Interesting. So just basically like adding more dimensions to the metrics that you check. And what are some of the most common pitfalls that developers or businesses face when it comes to deploying agents in production?
I think a lot of it is just this belief that the agent can do anything and the agent should be able to do everything. The joke that I always tell is the more I think a company thinks that they need a smarter AI, the dumber the team is, right? Because what it's saying is, oh, I don't want to do any thinking about what my customer wants. I don't want to do any thinking about how my team should operate. I want the AI to do it. Whereas a really great founder usually says, I've talked to a lot of customers and this task is really important. I watched experts do this task. It looks like they do it this way. Can my team model out this pipeline? The answer is usually yes. And they do quite a good job.
Is there any specific like tech stack that you're using to deploy agents in production? Is there any frameworks that you can recommend?
Yeah, not on my end, mostly because I let the companies sort of take the stack. And usually the companies that reach out to me already use some kind of technology, whether it's like a, LangChain or like Pydantic, for example. But for the most part, the most important thing is to build something quickly, start tracking that data, and then doing that data analysis, right? If it takes you 6 months to build the app, it just means that it takes you 6 months to make a better decision using that data. I would rather someone make an app as quickly as possible and then spend 2 or 3 months looking at that data.
So just getting the MVP out as quickly as possible and then collecting some real feedback and improving
Exactly.
based on that feedback, right?
Yeah. Like the biggest improvements will always be these like weird things that happen. Like we launched a company once, we launched an agent, all of a sudden it stopped doing well, and we looked at why. And it's like, oh, all of the people using it are from like Turkey and China. We have a multilingual problem, right? And then we spent like a month basically figuring out how to like build different UIs and like showing like Chinese and Turkish on the website. Like those have become the real problems. It's not the agent.
So it seems like you work with a ton of early startups in AI that are trying to distribute AI agents across the world. So how do you actually productize an agent? How do you make it usable by anyone around the world?
I mean, I think a lot of it really is just the fact that if you try to build something for everyone, it's still very hard. And usually when I see companies do that, it tend to stay away. It's often the case that, when you work with these vertically integrated companies, you know what the useful work is. You have experts that you can talk to and interview. You can hire people who do these things themselves and work on replacing the difficult parts of their job. That's usually when things are really successful. I think it's much harder to like build a good chatbot and not be Anthropic or OpenAI.
Yeah, I would probably not want to compete with OpenAI. Another use case that's currently becoming more and more popular is software development. Like OpenAI says that, right now they have top 50 programmer. I think O3 is top 50. And by the end of this year, they're going to have #1 programmer in the world. All of the tech CEOs are saying that, AI is already responsible for writing 20 to 30% of their code. So what do you think about the role of a developer in the future? How do you think it's going to change, and how can we as developers adapt to these changes?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one I think is just the fact that distribution matters more than ever. There's only two problems, distribution and product. If product is made much easier with AI, then I think a lot of the time that you save might be worth going to doing distribution and learning to market yourself. And at least if you're thinking about doing a business. And then when it comes to actually being a developer, a lot of it is now about what is the right organization of code? How do I support like high quality documentation, and how do I make sure those are in sync? Like, I basically just had Cursor and Cloud Code write, I think like 6,000 lines of docs for this library that I've been working on. How do I write code in a way that makes it easy for an agent to work with? Is that multiple files? Is that single files? I've changed the way I write documents, where documents now always mention the code file so they know where to look.
Oh, cool. So we will definitely get into RAG in a bit. I think there are a lot of things you can share on RAG and on how to improve RAG systems. But first of all, I wanted to talk about a video that I just recently posted on this exact topic. And I said that essentially developers will have to adapt by the end of this year. And I've gotten a lot of hate for this video, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Because people are saying essentially that AI can't work on large code bases. Like, sure, it can build you a Tetris game, but it doesn't know how to work with large code bases. And I'm arguing that the reason it doesn't know how to do that is because our code bases are not made for AI. It's not because of AI, it's because of our code bases. So the practice that you've just said is actually extremely interesting to me. Like, you add special links inside the file so the AI can navigate between different documentation pages. Is there anything else that you can share for developers and development teams on how they can adapt to AI?
I now have a lot of Claude files scattered around my repository that explain things like how I do testing. I have a lot of Cursor rules. I have a lot of Cursor rules on how I do code review, right? It's I make Claude Code pick up its PRs. So it's okay, make this big change. Don't make one PR, make 3 PRs, each one merging to the other one. And now what I do is I'll run the job. I can go get my coffee. And as I'm in line for coffee, I'll get a message that's like, oh, PR1 has been created. It is only 60 lines of code. And then PR2 has been created. It's also 60 lines of code. And another 60 lines of code. And each pull request now is really easy to review, right? Because we all hate this like 1,000-line, mega pull request that some engineer makes. And now Claude can sort of organize that for me and write much more detailed descriptions. That has been one thing that to me has been really valuable, especially because Claude Code can also pull the PR comments from GitHub back into the context. So I will be on my phone leaving comments in the code on GitHub, and I'll come back to my desk and I just say /PR comment, pull everything back, fix everything I said, and I go to my next the coffee shop.
That's actually one of the things that excites me about AI agents so much, is that once you've built an AI agent, it's basically infinitely scalable. Like, you can just tell one developer to create 2 PRs to the same code base at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the case with AI agents. You build an AI agent once, and then it can create 1,000 PRs for you, right? At the same time, it can run in parallel as much as you want. So when AI brings such tremendous scalability to organizations, how do you actually price for a solution like this? Because you can't even price it as like an employee anymore, because it's like 1,000 employees, right?
Yeah, but again, I think this is why we are going to move to a world where most things are going to be on value-based pricing. Like, would I pay $2,000 for a marketing AI? Would I pay a 10% commission to a marketing AI? Yeah, these are the questions I think that are going to be really important in the future. Like if I have an AI book meetings for me, should I pay when the meeting is booked, or should I pay when a sale is made, right? There are people who get paid on value-based pricing. And I think for the most part, people who are being paid value-based, their customers are happier because everything is alignment. And I don't even think it's a favor that some people charge others hourly. I don't think it's a good business model to begin with. And I'm just really excited to see more and more AI systems go into a world where you might be priced on success rather than priced on usage.
So you also have a course called Systematically Improving RAG Applications, which from what I've heard so far is excellent. We're actually considering purchasing it for our team as well. Can you briefly explain what does it mean to systematically improve RAG applications?
Yeah. So what has happened in the last year was a lot of my consulting was, it's not working. It doesn't feel good. Like, what should we do? And after like 6 or 7 engagements, I kind of came up with a playbook of just the steps you have to follow. And now it's kind of like the playbook I use when these consulting engagements sort of involve improving search systems. Step number 1, you create position and recall evaluations for your search system. Step number 2, once you have enough evals, you can think about fine-tuning a model. But you can only fine-tune a model if you have feedback data. So let's go now evaluate and audit the systems you have in place to collect user feedback. Thumbs up, thumbs down, customer complaints, etc. And by doing that, you can improve your embedding model and improve your search systems. And then the second half of the course is around tool discovery, right? What tools does my agent need? How do I figure out if a tool is missing? You have to do this topic modeling. Once you find these topics, you can solve each individual topic with a couple of tools. And then it's about how do you make sure that it's using the tools correctly, right? Like, for example, do you give your AI tools for GitHub, or do you just say, well, it has access to command line. Shouldn't it be able to do everything? But it turns out if you give it a GitHub tool, it will make more pull requests. It will create more issues. But if you give it a command line tool, it will use other things to get the job done. And so it's about breaking up the problem, solving each individual problem separately, and then figure out how to combine them. And those are the 2 systems I implement when I do my consulting work.
Wow, that actually sounds really exciting to me. So you actually deploy agents without like all of the sets of tools that they might need first? Is that what you're proposing? Yeah. Is like you deploy an agent, you test it, and then you evaluate, and then you add more tools accordingly. Is that how you do it?
Exactly. Because, you want something out in the world, and there's just things you can't do, and that's usually fine. But if you discover that, 10% or 30% of your customers are asking you for something, shouldn't you discover that using the data that you have, right? Obviously, you want to talk to people, but if you don't have that luxury, looking at the data is the second best thing.
I see, because it's so different from how we approach traditional workflows. Because, if when building workflows, you just define all of the steps in advance, like all of the actions that you can take. But here, it seems like you're taking a lot more dynamic approach.
Yeah, because think about like how we start a business, right? We first start a business and we go, okay, what do I do next? Okay, I have to go record videos and edit stuff. Okay, well then what? And then you do that, and then what? And at some point, when you scale, you say, you know what? I've realized that every time I make a video, I should come out with a blog post and I should do this and I do that. But it's because you've done it so many times that you've discovered the sub process, the standard operating procedures that you need to implement in your business. And sometimes it's the CEO's job to realize that this thing is happening. Sometimes it's the employee's job to go, oh, I should automate this in some way. And doing it with AI should feel the same way.
And regarding the first part of the course, you also mentioned fine tuning. Do you think fine tuning is necessary, or do you start without fine tuning?
I think fine tuning a language model is going to be very hard and generally not going to be worth it. Mostly because owning inference is going to be very difficult. Fine tuning re-rankers, fine tuning embedding models for search are very worth it. They're going to cost you $3 or $4 to train a model, and it's probably going to give you 10, 15% better performance.
I see, because I thought you meant traditional fine tuning.
Yeah.
And what I find it's nowhere near as useful as fine tuning your RAG application. I also see that the dev tools for AI agent developers are just becoming so good that most of us don't even need to think about this anymore, at least for small businesses where, for example, OpenAI already has the file search out of the box, and now Google is also entering the space with their own ADK and also their own even agent marketplace.
Yeah.
So do you still think that in the future, as this space becomes more and more productized and more companies release those amazing dev tools that make agents so much more accessible, will there still be space for independent developers like us, or is big tech just going to dominate agent building completely?
I think, again, it's going to be the case that for these large companies, they're going to have to build fairly horizontal tools. And so it is just very possible to find useful niches, is it going to be easy for a developer to make a $10 million company? Maybe it's going to be hard, but I can't imagine why you couldn't build a company that's 1 or 2 people making $1 or $2 million per person. I think it's actually very possible now, especially with the leverage that you have. And also because I would only say maybe 30, 40% of running a business is the code, right? You just have to become more entrepreneurial and more individual when it comes to these kind of things.
So just taking initiative and focusing on a specific vertical that those large companies can't possibly cover by themselves. We're not talking software engineering, that's kind of obvious. We're talking some niche down solution that requires some form of a specific expertise and actually, making it happen, taking initiative and going for it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're making over 6 figures per month now doing consulting in AI, right?
Yeah.
So for anyone just getting started in the space, how do you recommend they find their first client?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just figure out what you're interested in and understand what kind of problems and pains you run into, right? Once you have that in mind, you can just build your own tools. You can just write about them, for example, and free content generally is the easiest way to get started. I mean, I think the easiest way really is getting referrals. For example, I've actually been in machine learning for about 10 years. And so when AI popped up in this past couple of years, I was already pretty well established in the community. But most of my work now comes from my writing, right? I am writing about problems that other big companies are facing today.
Were there any specific mindset shifts that led you to become, a leader in AI from just a developer?
I think the big one is understanding that I have to write about things from the perspective of the pain of the customer. If I want to get customers, I can't write about, this weekend I learned this thing or that thing, right? It's how you can improve your business, right? It is the mistakes you need to avoid versus just, I learned this week, or I learned this that week. Those things really nobody cares about, right? In the sense that unless your followers could care, but maybe not your customers. And so really understanding the pain and the benefit of what your solution is rather than, how valuable am I? How smart am I? Those things really put you in a position where you, I think, for the most part, limit your earning potential, right? If I feel like I am a senior engineer and I deserve $250 an hour, I know exactly how much I want to make in the year. But if I have 2 customers and one of them has a team of 7 people or one of them has no team, the team of 7 people probably has a bigger problem. They might not know how to spend their time. And if you waste the time of 4 engineers, that's already $1 million a year that you're wasting. So what's 2% of that, right?
I see. So how exactly do you price your services?
Yeah, so let me take a step back, which is the first thing I try to do is I try to have a minimum level of engagement, right? It's a number I have on my website. And the goal isn't to communicate that, oh, I'm very expensive, like you can't afford me. But neither is it to say you can afford me because I'm very cheap. But I say typically customers tend to spend about $60,000 to $80,000 over a period of 2 or 3 months. And, that number on the website sort of helps me filter out like what kind of customers I was looking for. If Walmart goes on my website and they say $60,000, like, oh, what could I possibly get for that little money, right? I am investing, $200 million in AI. McKinsey will charge me $3-4 million, but I'm probably going to get a lot more. But a series, seed company that just raised $1 million, they might go, oh, I don't actually know what I want. So I don't know if this is a good bet. So that helps you filter out the right customers. And then once you do that, a lot of it is a conversation on how big is the problem that you're working on and how accountable you are for that solution.
Okay, so once you've filtered all of those initial customers, and once you schedule the call with someone who is okay with this initial price, how do you actually justify it to them?
So a lot of it is understanding what the real pain is, right? So for example, they might come to me and say, Jason, we need our AI to be more reliable. And it's like, why now? What is at stake in your business that you need this AI to be more reliable? A bad customer might say, I don't know, I've been trying it out. It doesn't seem like it's doing what I want it to do. Other customers might say, well, we launched our product. We went viral. We hit 1 million ARR and the churn is through the roof. We're losing 20% of our customers every month. And then if I ask the question, oh, how much does that cost to you? Now it says, oh, actually, I'm losing $200,000 of ARR every month. And I don't know if I lose this customer, if they're going to come back in 3 months. How much is that worth to you? Right? That sounds like a problem that's $100,000 every month. If I ask for $30,000 a month to stop the bleeding, maybe that feels like the right kind of deal. And maybe it has some guarantees on, like, if we don't hit these KPIs, you don't pay me the full price.
I see. So a lot of people, when they are starting out, they're kind of thinking about how to price their service. So they're thinking, about the price in terms of the service that they can provide.
Yeah.
While what you're saying, I think, is a lot closer to some form of like a value-based pricing, where you charge them for the value that you provide.
Yeah. And obviously, it's not always going to be the case that I can just say, well, I want 20% or 30% of the value. But I think what this unlocks in terms of a mindset is you'll realize how often you're not overpricing yourself, right? Like, here's the story. Yeah. This company paid me $700 an hour to interview their senior AI team and to help them hire the head of AI. So at the end of this, I made $20,000. It's like, oh my God, I got paid $20,000 to just read people's resumes and ask them like what the hardest problem they're working on. Like, wow, lucky me. At the end of that, we hired 4 engineers. Each one was being paid $200,000 a year. And we hired a head of AI who had recognized me on a podcast, right? And then I find out the recruiter made $200,000 because the recruiter makes 20% of the payroll of each person. Okay, so the recruiter made 10 times more than I did, right? Wow. Then with the head of AI joining this company, 6 months later, I see the news. They raised a Series B and the head of AI is like joining this company and they raised a Series B to like make more investments in AI. And that was a $20 million like Series B. And so the head of AI's equity probably went up quite a bit. The CEO's equity went up probably like a couple $1 million. And I'm sitting there like 6 months later going like, oh, I thought I was like winning because I was making $700 an hour. Right? But you realize in that situation, I was still the most exploited person in that engagement, right? The employees made more money. The employees got jobs. The head of AI joined the company. They were able to raise the money. The recruiter made like $200,000. The founders made like $1 million. I was like, okay, I need to really think about how I change pricing and what they're getting by working with me, not how much I cost.
Okay, that sounds really exciting. So what's on a roadmap for Instructor, and what are you personally planning to focus on in the future?
For the roadmap of instructor, there's not much to be done right now. I think most of it is actually going to be around like what are the new like LLM tools I plan on investing in. And I think what we talked about earlier is going to be really important, right? We want to invest in some more tools to do this data analysis. So we came out with a library called Cura, Kura, and that does this topic analysis. And then our goal is to also come out with something that is going to be sort of a light version of Ragus to create an evals library. And then what we'll be able to do is say, okay, given these conversations, I have metrics and I have ways of grouping the data. So let me group the data, find the average metrics, and just now allow me to just explore more and more what is going on in these conversations with AI and what can be done to make them better. Right? And I just think that the conversations we have with AI now is probably the most interesting data set I can imagine having access to.
Definitely. I mean, ChatGPT already knows more about me than my parents.
Exactly.
So this is basically like a library for exactly what you just described. It's like clustering data, extracting insights, and seeing how you can further improve your AI agents based on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it already out or is it just coming up?
Cura is out. We're mostly working on the documentation now. I can like send you a link afterwards. We're still doing some tests, but we'll have a presentation on AI and Engineering Summit.
Okay, awesome. I'd be happy to cover it on one of my videos on this channel later.
Yeah, I would love to have Ivan come on and share what he's working on.
Yeah, that would be great because honestly, evals has always been such a challenge for us. Like OpenAI has their own solution, but it's like a bit challenging to set up. Like there's no out of the box solution like you described.
Exactly. So I'm pretty excited for these things to exist. And again, it's going to be just using those tools to sort of drive more consulting revenue. And then the idea is that these tools can like just stay free and stay lightweight.
All right. So where can we find out more about your work and learn from you?
You can just find me on Twitter at JXNLCO. But generally, if you want to learn more about RAG, we have a newsletter called improvingrag.com. And if you want to learn about consulting and the work that we do, so check out learnindyconsulting.com, 2 little websites that can help you out.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. We'll leave all the links down below and looking forward to covering that library that you mentioned.
Yeah, awesome. We'll send an intro afterwards. Thanks, everyone.